Welcome to Phoenix Podcast, hosted by Amin Moinin, where we like to take a deep dive into economics and politics. Now, Canada's federal election's coming up on April 28th, 2025. So we're going to be looking at some crucial economic and political considerations as we approach that date. We've got a lot of interesting source material to cover, and it's all grounded in some pretty important principles. Individual liberty, market economy, the Austrian School of Economics, really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So our mission here, if you choose to accept it, is to extract the core insights from this perspective, so we can understand the key challenges and potential approaches that Canada is facing. Ultimately, we want to see how these principles suggest, how Canada can navigate its future amidst all these significant domestic and international challenges.
Right. Yeah. And, think of it this way. We're examining the challenges and opportunities facing Canada through a very specific framework, one that really prioritizes individual choice, limited government intervention, and the power of free markets. To generate that prosperity, we're going to be looking at how these core ideas might actually inform policy decisions across a range of really crucial areas.
Okay, so let's lay the groundwork here. What are the fundamental principles we're talking about?
At the very core, there's this strong emphasis on individual liberty. So this means the belief that individuals should have the maximum possible freedom right to make their own decisions, manage their own lives, with minimal coercion from the state. From this comes the concept of limited government. It's not that government has no role, but rather that its function should be clearly defined, efficient, and primarily focused on protecting individual rights, enforcing contracts, and making sure the rule of law is upheld.
And how does this then apply to economics?
Well, economically speaking, the focus is on free markets. This means creating an environment where entrepreneurship can really flourish, competition drives innovation and efficiency. Individuals are free to engage in, voluntary exchange with minimal government interference. The underlying principle here is that this unleashes human ingenuity, and that creates wealth. Integral to this is the concept of sound money, maintaining the stability and the purchasing power of the currency. Think of it like this: ensuring the value of your savings isn't eroded by rapid inflation. And finally, protecting private property rights. That is seen as absolutely fundamental. If individuals don't have secure ownership of their property, the incentive to invest and build for the future diminishes significantly.
So given those principles, let's tackle one challenge that's facing us right now: economic growth or the lack thereof. Many are talking about stagnation. How does this perspective diagnose that? And what's the suggested approach to fixing it?
Okay, so from this viewpoint, sluggish growth
True.
and rising unemployment are often signals that something is impeding the natural dynamism of the market. And so the pursued approach would be to implement reforms that enhance economic freedom. That could involve reducing the regulatory burden on businesses, making it easier for them to start, operate, and expand. It's all about unleashing that entrepreneurial spirit.
Now, how about investment and job creation? Those are two things that are on a lot of people's minds.
Absolutely. And lowering corporate taxes is often highlighted as a key lever. The rationale is that it makes Canada a more attractive destination for businesses to invest their capital. And when companies invest more, they typically hire more people, leading to job creation and overall economic expansion. It's about creating that competitive environment for capital.
Now, on the other side of that, what should Canada avoid doing if we want to get the economy moving again from this perspective?
The major caution is against excessive government spending and, heavy-handed intervention in the economy. The argument is that when the state becomes too involved, through subsidies, bailouts, or overly complex regulations, it can distort those market signals, stifle innovation, and ultimately hinder long-term sustainable growth. It's seen as potentially creating those inefficiencies and dependencies.
Let's talk about something that's affecting Canadians every day: inflation and the rising cost of living. How does this framework suggest we tackle that?
The primary focus is on maintaining sound monetary policy. This involves measures taken to control the money supply and ensure the stability of the currency. Think of it like a central bank's role, keeping the amount of money in circulation aligned with the actual production of goods and services. And alongside this, there's a strong emphasis on fiscal responsibility, meaning that the government needs to keep its own spending in check to avoid contributing to those inflationary pressures through large budget deficits.
So government belt tightening is seen as part of the solution.
Precisely. The concern is that when government spends excessively and the money supply grows too rapidly, it can lead to a devaluation of the currency. When the currency weakens, the prices of imported goods go up, and that can ripple through the entire economy, making everything more expensive for consumers.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about healthcare. It's a system that many Canadians are quite passionate about.
Sure.
How does this perspective approach making it more sustainable?
The core idea involves introducing more market-based mechanisms to encourage greater efficiency and responsiveness within the healthcare system. This could mean exploring ways to empower individuals, give them more choices in their healthcare options, and fostering a greater role for the private sector, in delivering certain services. The aim is to increase competition and innovation in a sector that's facing significant cost pressures.
More options, maybe a bigger role for the private sector. What's the big no-no from this perspective?
The caution would be against simply, doubling down on the current model with more government funding, but without addressing the fundamental structural inefficiencies. The argument is that simply increasing bureaucracy and state control might not solve the issues of long wait times, limited service offerings, and those rising costs. There's a belief that market forces can drive better outcomes.
Okay, housing affordability. It's a crisis in many parts of Canada. What's the recommended way forward here to make homes more accessible?
Deregulating zoning laws is often cited as a crucial step. The idea is that current restrictions on land use are actually limiting the supply of housing, and that drives up prices. By making it easier to build more homes of different types and densities, the market can respond more effectively to demand. Additionally, streamlining the approval processes for new developments and reducing bureaucratic hurdles for private developers are seen as ways to boost the supply of housing.
So less red tape, more building.
Exactly. The concern is that heavy regulations, lengthy approval processes, and interventions like rent control can actually discourage investment in new housing construction and ultimately lead to a scarcity of available units, which keeps those prices artificially high.
Canada's a trading nation. How should we approach our trade relationships, especially with all the tariffs and protectionism around the world these days?
The preferred approach really emphasizes diversifying our trade partnerships. Relying too heavily on any single trading partner can create vulnerabilities. Actively pursuing free trade agreements with a wider range of countries is seen as key to opening up new markets for Canadian goods and services. And consistently advocating for the principles of free trade on that international stage is viewed as vital for long-term global prosperity, which ultimately benefits Canada.
Now, what's the wrong move when it comes to trade?
Engaging in retaliatory tariffs is generally seen as a path to avoid, as it can lead to those escalating trade wars that can harm domestic industries and consumers on both sides. Similarly, embracing protectionist measures is viewed with caution, as it can shield domestic industries from competition, make them less efficient, and ultimately hurt the overall economy. The focus should be on those open markets and free exchange.
How do we balance economic growth with environmental responsibility, according to these principles?
The emphasis is on using market-based solutions to encourage environmental stewardship. This could include things like clearly defined property rights for natural resources and well-designed carbon pricing mechanisms that incentivize businesses and individuals to reduce emissions in the most cost-effective ways, supporting private sector innovation in clean technologies through research and development is also seen as a key driver of progress.
So using those market forces to find greener solutions, rather than just top-down regulations.
Exactly. The concern with overly prescriptive regulations is that they can stifle that economic activity, and they may not always be the most efficient or innovative way to achieve those environmental goals. The belief is that harnessing the power of the market can lead to more dynamic and effective solutions.
Okay. National debt. Big concern for many Canadians. How does this framework suggest we get our fiscal house in order?
A strong commitment to achieving balanced budgets, and a concerted effort to reduce those unnecessary government expenditures are central tenets here. This involves prioritizing essential government functions and finding ways to make public spending more efficient. Additionally, implementing policies that encourage savings and investment in the private sector are seen as crucial for long-term fiscal health, as a strong private sector can better support government finances.
What's the danger when it comes to national debt?
Persistent deficit spending and the continued accumulation of national debt are viewed as significant threats to long-term economic stability. High levels of debt can lead to higher interest payments, potentially crowding out other important government spending and placing a burden on future generations.
Last but not least, let's talk about education and making sure we have a skilled workforce for the future. What's the approach here?
Introducing greater choice and competition within the education system is often advocated for. This could include things like charter schools or voucher programs. The idea is that competition can actually drive improvements in education quality. and outcomes. Additionally, there's an emphasis on ensuring that educational programs are closely aligned with the actual demands of the labor market so that graduates have the skills that employers need.
What should we steer clear of?
The concern is with rigid one-size-fits-all education policies that may not adequately cater to the diverse needs of students or the rapidly evolving demands of the economy. There is a belief that more flexibility and responsiveness are needed to prepare the workforce of tomorrow.
So as we look ahead to this federal election, this deep dive into individual liberty, limited government, free markets, really provides a unique lens to examine the challenges that Canada is facing, from getting the economy growing, tackling inflation, to ensuring sustainable health care, affordable housing, strong trade relationships, responsible environmental policy, sound fiscal management, and of course effective education.
Absolutely. The underlying conviction is that by adhering to these core principles, Canada can foster a more prosperous, resilient, and ultimately freer society, driven by the ingenuity and initiative of individuals within a competitive marketplace, where government plays a clearly defined but limited role.
This gives us all a really specific framework to consider as we evaluate all the different platforms and policy proposals out there. It raises some fundamental questions about the balance between individual freedom and collective action. In shaping Canada's future, I think it's so interesting to think about which aspects of this approach resonate most with us. And what other questions does it raise? As we consider the choices ahead, what are the potential trade-offs? What are the challenges that might arise from consistently applying these principles? These are really crucial questions to ponder as we engage with this upcoming election.